Kia ora no tātou. Kia ora tātou e tau nei. I runa i te kaupapa. E whakarauika nei tātou kai roto i tēnei whare. Kai aku pāpā, rere ata, e tame. Ko te nui nā me ki o Ngāti Whātua, o nā mana whenua, kai pipitea, kai te tini keke rā nei. Hoi no, ka ki mai a te tohuna o tene, e hoa, māu e haere, ki te mihi atu, ki te marea e tai mai. Nō reira, kai aku pāpā, e hara tēnei, kai konei, hei whakaiti, hei takai i te mana, o Ngāti Whātua, awai ake, awai ake, awai ake. Nō reira, kia koutou katoa, i nā iwi, o tāmaki makaurau, o tāmaki here nā waka, o tāmaki here nā tanata, hara mai, hara mai, hara mai. Hara mai i runa i te kaupapa hei whakawhiti kōrero, hei whiua i nā pātai, ara, ki nā tohuna, ki nā apataki rā nei, ko tēnei kaupapa, ko te mauri o te wai. Anō reira kāre hia ki te tōro hia i tēnei mihi. Nau mai, hara mai rā, tēnā koutou, haumi e, ui e, tā e kiwe. I mua i taku mutuna e te pāpā rere ata. Kai te are mai oku nei tarina ki o kōrerora. Hei hoki whakamuri ki nā whakapapa o te ao kāneane tana, o te ao tawhito, e a hei koe ki te hono, te rā ao, ki te anaia nei, e pāna ki te wai. Nō reira, kia tātou katoa, tēnā koutou, ui e, haumi e, nau mai, hara mai, tā i ki e. Te reira will translate. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora koutou katoa. Thank you, Richard. Essentially, for those of you who aren't fluent in reo, essentially what Richard said was, g'day you fellas, welcome. On behalf of Ngāti Whātua, of whom there are only 3 currently left in Auckland, the rest are down at that beautiful cultural celebration in Wellington at the Cake Tin. To here, beside the cool waters of the Waitemata, looking out at that iconic island of Rangitoto, an island that my 3-year-old daughter is obsessed with because of its historical connections as a place of refuge for Jin the otter, for those of you who remember that wonderful resident of Auckland many years ago. For those of you who don't know me, kia ora, ko te reira, taka wingawa, ko Ngāti Pākehā aho. Like many of you here in Auckland, I am an immigrant, tāmaki makaora, originally from the Waikato, wedged in between Lake Waikare and the Waikato River, which back when I grew up with it was not going to be a source of drinking water for Auckland. If you'd said it at that stage, we would have found that the funniest thing we had ever heard, and I probably would not have moved to Auckland. Nonetheless, now here I am, as many of you, just as a show of hands, how many immigrants to Auckland now living here, to Tāmaki Makaurau? Pretty much everybody. For me now, I now recognise my maunga Waitarua. I look out of my window at the beautiful rainforest that is the Waitakere Ranges, and I'm wedged in just beside my new river, ko Opunuku Te Awa. Beautiful little river out there. It winds in part of the twin streams in behind Corbins. I'm just, in terms of the water size, I'm just out of the flood catchment on there. Looked at that when I was wanting to land bank and subdivide the other day because, you know, I'm in Auckland. And one of those great things, and it'd probably be a great example of the nature of this conversation we've had. I've lived there for nearly 12 or 15 years, and of course the locals would say, never floods here anymore, doesn't flood here anymore. They've changed it, they've fixed it. Sure enough, what did it do 2 years ago? Flooded up to there. That is the nature of water. And I had the great pleasure, one of the great joys and privileges of this city, driving across that causeway on the northwestern and looking out at the glowing waters of my new Moana, the inner harbour of the Waitemata. Looking at those boats that are moored there, the sandy beaches of Point Chev and Te Atatu Peninsula. Looking out there at that breeding ground of all of those little sharks and things, all the fish that come in, all the food source that is there, and that recreation area that is so important to the people of Auckland. This huge region that we're in, primarily in many ways rural, but none of us more than 20 k's from the sea. And we think, when it comes to water, we have this very intense spiritual connection with it in New Zealand, both as Māori, that's being recognised in some of the conversations we're having around water, and I think certainly as Pākehā as well, maybe more so than other places around the world. And then driving past in there, past Oakley Creek, past that wonderful little waterfall that sits there, past Western Springs, that historical source of water, and now kind of a fetid duck pond, and then along down here to the waterfront, to the beautiful waters of the sparkling harbour. But of course, it's not just what is seen when it comes to water, it's the unseen as well. And I know that coming down here underneath me, a labyrinth of pipes for those three waters, the wastewater, the drinking water, the storm water, all being taken care of by people who I like to think of. I saw some people before in the wastewater sector, people who just bury money under the ground and take care of things. And I do a lot of work at wastewater conferences, and I say they're kind of no one really thinks about stormwater until there's a flood, and then suddenly there's a flurry of phone calls. All of that work that is done that costs all of that money, that makes this place a better, a cleaner, a safer place to live, just goes on. And I think for many people, absolutely unrecognised. So we are here to discuss water tonight. I'm facilitating this kōrero on water, and it's giving us a chance to inspire and stimulate our thinking around the challenges that are facing Auckland in its widest context. Tonight we have a wonderful speaker. We have a panel to discuss our water future, and we have the chance for you to ask questions as well. One of my favourite things as an MC, you've all found your way to this building here on the beautiful harbour. I'm not going to tell you how to leave. So in the unlikely event of an emergency, the exits are pretty clearly marked. Head back down the stairs. Depending on what the nature of the emergency is, if it's a fire, there are no shortage of wonderful bars along the waterfront that you can sit in and just have a quiet beer and think, we're not getting back in there. If it's anything else, head just down and just make your own way home. The other important evacuation points, the bathrooms are located at the rear of the room. Wait staff will show us out, and if you do have a mobile phone, feel free to just put it onto silent. We may use that phone later in the course of the evening for our first presentation, and of course for your ability to ask questions later on. And these wouldn't happen, of course, without the generosity of the council and their partners. So thanking our Auckland partners, South Base Construction, the design partner, Resine, and all of the other program supporters. Ladies and gentlemen, what about a round of applause for those people who have made these conversations happen? So the format for tonight, very simple. We're going to have a keynote presentation from Rariata Makiha, followed by a discussion with our panellists. We're going to open up the discussion as well to the floor. We're going to be using Slido. Just a show of hands, how many people have been to a conference and used Slido before? Some of you will be familiar with it. It's pretty simple. It's an interactive Q&A tool for audience questions. We'll show you how to use that. If you have a smartphone, we encourage you to visit slido.com. So it's at slido.com. Enter the event code, which is simply #water, and you can ask your question through that. We're going to look to get through as many of those questions as we can. You can also submit your question during the course of the evening from the floor, and I know there are people at home. Kia ora to you. You are more than welcome, I think, to go onto that Slido and ask questions from the comfort of your lounge or your deck or your bus as you sit in transport thinking, geez, if only we'd invested in a bus lane on this particular section of the motorway, I could be home asking my question from the lounge. So, welcome to all of you. For those of you on social media, whatever platform that may be, you're also welcome to use the hashtag to tweet anything about this with the hashtag Auckland or AKL Conversations. We always try to ensure that Auckland Conversations are inclusive and accessible, so on-demand viewing of the event, that's happening now. A full transcript and captioning of this event and presentations are going to be available on the Auckland Conversations website in the next few days. All right, any questions? There's going to be no shortage of time for those later on. So, tonight's conversation. Water quality is becoming an issue for Auckland, from believing that water was plentiful and free to now facing the impacts of water scarcity, poor water quality, and the effects of climate change. The question is, what can we do about it? I don't know about you, but even the very fact of the humidity that we're currently experiencing, Auckland is too wet as far as I'm concerned. And of course, if you've been following the news of the cyclone that may or may not be coming down here, I know there's a lot of professionals in the industry who've been looking at that, as well as people who will be attending all of the many functions around Auckland over the course of the next few days over the weekend. So a value-based approach connects the decisions around what matters most. When we talk about values, we're describing what is important to us. And those values, of course, differ for everybody, but they're the deep connections that we have between water, the environment, and of course people. We all have a responsibility and an interest in working together to ensure that decisions around our water future are made and not deferring the problem for future generations to resolve. So looking beyond that kind of 3-year election cycle and looking forward to those decisions that will affect people in 10, in 15, in 20 years' time. And there are some very big decisions to be made. And there are obviously different ideas on how we protect and enhance Te Māori o Te Wai. And we believe that this is an exciting space for discussion and collaboration. So tonight, we aim to start a conversation about how we change the way we think about and value one of our most precious resources, water. And you've only had to live without water for any period of time, even the few short hours that Watercare has the water turned off to fix an outage in your street, or indeed if you've travelled anywhere in the world to know just how precious water is. I was thinking about it the other day. I was filling a watering can, I turned on a tap, and I just marvelled. I was with my little 3-year-old, and I was trying to explain to her how precious this gift of relatively free, pure water coming out of a tap is. We take it for granted. A lot of people growing up in a city will never, particularly Auckland, will never have experienced water shortfalls in a way. They turn a tap on, water comes out, they flush the toilet, it goes away again. For that tiny little bit in the middle, they know nothing of the sort of the infrastructure and the expense and the work on either side of that little moment in their time. For those of you who live in rural catchments, you'll know at this time of the year there's very good money to be made in hauling water in tankers to fill people's tanks. People have got their gardens deciding whether or not, my neighbour deciding whether or not as a pensioner she'll put water onto her garden or not. These are all little things that we all have to think about in this water debate. So, to set the scene, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce our first speaker. Reriata Makiha is a Māori astrologer, a renowned Māori astrologer, one of the leading authorities on the Maramataka, the Māori lunar calendar. For anyone who's seen that incredible moon that came up the other day, it was just, I came back from the airport. I'd been down in Invercargill where there was pleasant rain and relatively cool temperatures, and flew back into Auckland, and there was that incredible moon rising over the city. He is currently conducting research on how to determine the phases of the Māori lunar calendar with Auckland University and how Māori in past managed their lives and tasks in accordance with Maramataka, including the fishing, the planting, the harvesting, all of course dependent on the lunar cycle and other signs within nature. And if you are looking at that lunar cycle, you'll have seen it even mentioned in the news today in relation to the cyclone that's coming down. King tide looking as if it may also coincide with that. All of these things blending together into the synthesis of the environment, the lunar calendar, and the way that we treat the world in which we live. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Reriata Makiha.
Kāti kia ora mai rā tātou. Te mea tuatahi tēnā koe Richard e mihi mai nei kia mātou. Tēnā hoki koe e tame pupuri nei hoki te mano te wāhi nei. Tēnā hoki rā koutou kua pai mai nei ki roto tēnei hui huinga. I won't delve too long on replying to the mihi because I've been given about 15 minutes to capture the essence of 15,000 years of observation. So thanks very much. And to make a confession right up front that I'm not a student of academia, I'm a student of oral histories. And so a lot of the referencing and the things I'm going to talk about, you will not find them written anywhere. They were passed down through the schools of learning brought over by Nuku Tawhiti on the Ngātoki Matawhaurua, along with the companion Waka the Māmari, captained by Ruanui. When they arrived, they set up what was called the Whatu Punga Punga, the Māori, our whare wānanga from Hokianga. And that's where I have to make a confession. Everything I talk about tonight is from Hokianga. So, and how you make it work over here, I have no idea. But thank you all for being so concerned about what's happening with our waterways, and also thank you for coming along to listen to these ramblings from a poor example of Santa Claus. But I wanted to divide the room up into four, because in 15 minutes' time I want us all to be connected back to water. And we can do that. So if we imagine that the front here back down to the middle, if you're allowed in my sessions to have your cell phones on, Okay, and for those of you who've got a Huawei 5G, that's even better because it'd be faster than anyone else. Okay. And if we have sort of 4 groups up the front here, you're allowed to turn your cell phones on. And what I want you to do was to actually check the high tides for March the 21st. The high tides for March the 21st. And then the group down the, good question, Auckland. We're going to use East Coast. Since we're on this side, we're going to use the East Coast Maramataka. And the group down the back, can you have a look at doing the same date, March the 21st, West Coast, Onehunga? And then the group down the back, number 3, can you have a look at the tides for March the 29th? I'll explain it later on, the tides for March the 29th. And then you guys up the, also West Coast. Also West Coast. And you guys up the front here, can you also be West Coast, but have a look at the 4th of April. 4th of April, the tides, also West Coast. So there's 1 East Coast and 3 West Coast tides. Ka pai? And I'll explain it later on. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is what we were brought up in our oral histories to understand water. We need to take us all back to a time that was when everything was water. So our tupuna talked about Wainui Aotea. And from Wainui Aotea, there was kōrero, the he wai katoa te ao. The world was water. And from Wainui Aotea came the expansive different kinds of the oceans. We had Moana Nui, the great ocean, Moana Roa, the long ocean, Moana Pōtango, the dark ocean, and Moana Hakere, the gloomy ocean. And then we get to Moana Tū ki te wao, and these were the inland lakes. And then we had Moana Tū ki te repo, and these were the wetlands and swamplands that have been drained for farming. The natural filtration of all our awa and all the rivers and that came from Moana Tū ki te repo. And in our understanding of water, that water, everything, all waters go to Tangaroa Whakamautai, or go to the ocean, to the salt water. And here's the interesting thing about our understanding of the water, is that there is a whakapapa to wai. To water, it's the Māori version of that water cycle that's been taught in schools. Okay, but listen to the difference. This is some ao Māori worldview of the water, the whakapapa to water. Right at the top between Whakatauānuku and Whakatauārangi, there are 2 companion waterways called Pipi and Wawai. And Pipi is the punawai, the water that bubbles up out of the ground, and Wawai is the aquifer. And they lead the whakapapa to wai. They are high up in our conversation on wai. Not today, okay? Those punawai are subverted to an afterthought. But those were the most important water sources that our tupuna understood. So Pipi and Wawai, those were the what we call punawai, that spring up out of the ground, and Wawai was the deep water aquifer. And there was clear process and tikanga around accessing that water. And so even when we were growing up, to go and get that punawai, there were special containers that you used to go and get that punawai. You did not use anything else. Nothing had to be tainted. You couldn't use any of your utensils from the kitchen. for example, that had any kai in it to go and get that wage. It was very sacred and very strictly policed too. Now, Auckland survived because of all those punawai, those pipi and the wawai, back in the early days before Watercare was born. So all Aucklanders, but today, to go and find those punawai, many of them would have been destroyed in the reconstruction of Auckland into a city. So the interesting thing about pipi and wawai is that there are really, really strict sacred protocols around those waterways. And there's one actually in the School of Engineering in Newmarket. They took it over from Lion Breweries. There's one down there, and I think they put a cap on it. And the pipi should never be kept. It should be flowing all the time. And that's the source of water that kept our people alive. So when the waka came in, when Tames Tupuna brought that waka in, the first thing they looked for was pipi. Pipi and waiwa. Oh, the Lion Breweries, yeah. Later on they looked for the Lion Breweries. And what they did was they planted puraka around those punawai. Puraka is a species of taro. We call it the purple taro. And it takes years, like to get about that big, takes about 20 years. But the purpose for that is to mark those punawai. And those punawai were always surrounded by whiki, one of the lower growing tree ferns that we know whiki. Ponga was the bit higher, the silver fern that we know, and then the mamaku, the real tall one, the whiki, the low growing one. They were always around those punawai. So they had the puraka, and then they put some eels in the tuna into these punawai to keep the puna clean. And what happens was, didn't matter where you went, sailed around for years, you might come back 10 years later to that spot, you had kai and you had wai. And there is the connection from this kōrero that I'm going to introduce to you from Tūkaki Waititi, who was from Ngāti Hine and Te Whānau Apanui. And Tūkaki Waititi's kōrero is this. And all our environmental work is based around this kōrero of his that encapsulates the intent of what we try and do in the environment. He said, ka hore he aha I hangātia I ahu no mai rānei kia noho wehe I tēnei ao. Ahakua matangaro ka mōhiotia te Māori. So nothing was ever created or emerged in this world to live in isolation. So that even a hidden face can be detected by its impact on something. Okay, so the way when we look at wai, we don't look at it in isolation. Even though the many, many variations of wai, we look at it in terms of having a companion, because everything has a companion. And the companion to wai from our Māori worldview is kai. You get rid of kai, you die. You get rid of wai, you die. So that's the constant companion to wai, is kai. And so when we look at Māori, I've been asked to talk about Māori, and I said to Tame, how do we explain something we don't see and can't imagine? Well, we can imagine it, but then if we did that, everyone in the room would have an imagination about what a Māori is. And so to understand it, if we try to understand, the old people put the things they could not understand, could not see, they put them into kind of like a category. And one of the categories is matangaro. And matangaro is a hidden face, okay? Māori sits in that realm of matangaro, of the hidden face. And how you detect the presence of a Māori, even in people, but especially in waterways, which we're talking about here, is the presence of kai in that waterway, right? You know, so when we go down to the waterways, up home there, and the first thing you have a look for is where's the watercress patch. And then you have a look and see what's also in there. Oh, lots of tuna in here, lots of karawaka, papane, kōkopu, all that type of things. The more you have food in that environment, the healthier that particular water source is. So kai is the indicator to the health of wai. So when we're talking about Mauriora, we look at the impact or we look at the presence of food in that waterway.
And what about tohu o te rangi? You see, we had some interesting things about people talking about te kaunga o te wai and, about water quality. And then they go and get these chemicals and they test for other chemicals in the waterway. And I say to Simon, what are you doing that for? At the time of around about October, November, I said, listen to the sounds of the birds. So we take kids outside and I said we're testing the water quality of the Otara Creek in this particular instance. So I will take the kids out in the car park. We don't need to go down to that creek. And so I asked the kids, what can you hear? And they said, nothing. I said, so that waterway is no good. So let's go back inside. And they, oh, hang on. What should you be hearing at this time? And it's a bird called a kōtare, the kingfisher. The kingfisher at that time of the year is feeding its babies, and it never, all good mothers, they don't go and take their babies to a place that's got no food. Hey. So when we were growing up along the Taheke River, there were just hundreds of kōtare. And so if you hear one kōtare on the river, then that's sort of marginal. If you hear 3 or 4, then you're starting to rise at about a 5 or 6 measurement. But then if you see multiple kingfishers or kōtare in those waterways, that waterway is good. And that's how we understand te kaunga o te wai, just by listening to that. That's fresh water, by the way. The saltwater indicator for te kaunga o te wai is the kāruhiruhi, the pied shag. So there's a companion too for Māori. Māori's a matangaro, but there's also a companion how our old people understood other things that you couldn't see, and that was called matahuna. So electricity is a matahuna, right? You can't see it. The difference between matahuna and matangaro is that there are consequences if you get things wrong. Yeah. So gravity, I presume, would be a matahuna as well. You can't see it, but there are consequences if you get it wrong. And so we come down to the corridor around like the spring water I was telling you about, the special protocols in accessing that water. So we get to this corridor around tapu. Okay, tapu is also a matahuna because there are consequences if you get things wrong. And I have to be careful too whenever I talk about this to make sure that there are no gentlemen around in long white trench coats, because you're starting to delve into a Okay, I wrote lots of word triggers down here. So what I want to talk about some of the other connections too that we understand for wai. So we only got to pipi and wawai, yeah? So we're going to go back there again. That's why I have word triggers here. We got pipi, wawai. The next layer of those waters is taitua and taiaro. And those are the surface waters that you see, in our creeks and rivers and that. There's taitua and taiaro. But here's the real cute one. Hamuimui and Uepapa Tangaroa. Those are companion waterways where you get fresh water underneath the sea. And there are people down in Ngāti Pro and also in Tauranga Moana who know where these aquifers are that bubble up through it, and they actually go out onto the salt water to get fresh water. They're very guarded, those areas, but that's the access of those fresh waters that fall out of the sky, and then they come down out into Tangaroa Whakamautai, and the freshwater aquifers, that's how they find their way into Tangaroa Whakamautai, through these access ways called Hamuimui and Uepapa Tangaroa. And then we head into that water cycle of evaporation, is it? That's what they, yeah. Anyways, things start heating up, steaming up, they go up. We get Ue Pōhewa and Tautini, and then they rise up into the sky, into clouds, and you all know the water cycle. But in the Māori version of it, you get up to Te Maruarangi, and really cute, and I hope no one takes this this next name as your next Christian name that you're going to give to your baby. It's Maroro Tua Uri Uri Te Awha. And that is when those thunder clouds and all that comes back. And then we get the rain. And the rain is signified in our legends anyway, that they are tears from Ranginui after he was separated from Papa Tuanuku, the Earth Mother. And so when the rain comes down, it's sacred, very sacred, so sacred that we were not permitted to drink it. And so that rain was captured in glass bowls that had no kai in it, very tapu, they think tapu. And that water was used for christening babies or for pure. You understand pure? Cleansing rituals and things like that. So they were used also for pure, but they were used for special occasions. That's how sacred that water was. And it's not until it gets infused with the mauri. Now we're back to talking mauri again. The mauri of Papa Tuanuku and Tāne Te Waiora, that it turns into wai, and we can then use it to drink. Pretty cool, eh? So we get down to the idea that those waters then flow back into those underground aquifers, Pipi and Wawai. They also flow through Taitu and Taioro, through all these other waterways. And anyway, so that's briefly some of the ideas that sit behind our understanding and our connection to water, because we are water. When people say, ko waiau, you think, they're saying, who am I? Well, it's actually you're saying, I am water. And ko wai koe, you are water too. But we are all water when you go back to it. And what we do in teaching our tamariki about water is that we are water. We are connected to the environment. We don't stand aside and have a look at, hey, what the heck's going on over here? We need to do this and do that over there. We actually kind of go with the flow, okay? It's about resilience. We know the climate's been changing all the time. We have references. Tame mentioned one earlier about there was a time when our tupuna never sailed the seas. And it was because there was just huge, huge waves. Ngaru nui, ngaru roa, ngaru pai whenua. There were tsunamis. There was a season, there's a long period of tsunamis. And so they never sailed. Some of the waka were wrecked. And so they had this, the climate change for us happens all the time. Okay? And how we indicate and identify when climate is changing, when things are changing on the surface, it changes faster, quicker, in what we call ngā tohu o te whenua. So in our world, we say, tuia ki te rangi, tuia ki te whenua, tuia ki te moana. E rongo te pō, e rongo te ao. And it talks about how everything is connected, from the rangi in the sky, the whenua, and also the moana. And how we know that connection is, well, if we have a look at the Pohutukawa tree. Has it come up yet? No. But there's a picture of a Pohutukawa tree up here. I know I saw it earlier. If we have a look at the Pohutukawa is closely related or in tune with a special star called Rehua, Antares. And Antares, when she rises in the east, sits on the horizon in the face of the sun, it triggers the flowering of some of those ancient Pohutukawa trees. So if you know the timing of when she rises in the east, you can tell when some of those Pohutukawa trees are going to flower. And there was a professor up at the university, I hope he's not here, he was kind of putting this thing about everything being connected. And I said, that Pohutukawa tree outside your house? I'll use Mātauranga Māori and I'll tell you when it's going to flower. 8th of December, 5:30 in the morning. And said, now you use your Western science knowledge and you give me a time and a date. Couldn't do it. But he got up that morning because he woke his wife up. His wife told me, he said, I got woken up and said, hey, it's flowering, it's flowering. How did they know that? I mean, it's understanding the connectedness of things. And so when we have a look at what's happening in the sky, nothing much is changing up there. Things move around, but there's nothing much changing up there. But on the ground, in our forests and in our environment on land, heaps of changes. And one of the changes we noticed some years back was the flowering of a plant called the kohurangi. For those geeky people who want to know, Brachyglottis kirkii. But I think if you Google kohurangi, it'll come up. So that used to flower around sort of towards the end of August. Last 3 years, it's been flowering in the first week of July. Huge change. So we know that things are happening and changing on the land just by watching, basically when things are happening in the ngahere. And so we can track it because we have 7 phases of summer. From Matiti Kura, Matiti Hana, Matiti Muramura, which we've just passed, we're now into Matiti Kaiwai. Matiti Raurehu, they say is passed as well, just came briefly and went. And then we're waiting for the Matiti Rau Tapata phase and the Matiti Rau Angina. The Rau Tapata phase is an interesting phase because that's when the seed pods in the bush burst and you can hear them falling to the ground. And if you're near Kauri forest, don't go into the Kauri forest because they drop the whole cone. Hey, you'd be pretty sore, I reckon, if one dropped on your head. So I'm jumping all over the place at the moment, but that's cool. I like doing that. One of the interesting things I thought I will bring up is around not just around how things are connected, the sky, the land, and to the moana, but the most important part of our environmental science is the kōrero around e rongo te pō, e rongo te ao. And te pō represents the female element, and te ao represents the male element. And in any environmental work that we do, we strive to keep those in balance. And that's one of the things that a lot of the work that we do in environments, they get out of balance because you start focusing on one thing. But in our Māori worldview around environmental sciences, we have to keep everything in balance. And I hope someone's can you give us a tweet about 3 minutes before? No? Okay, we'll carry on then. We're teaching our tamariki not to look at anything, at things in isolation. And so when we're looking at, for example, water quality testing, you need to understand the environmental elements that are present. And so we teach them about Tāwhiri Mātea. You fellas all know Tāwhiri Mātea? The Atua of all the winds. It was the Christians that called them gods, but they were personified members. We gave them. They were personified from natural elements. So Tāwhiri Mātea looks after the winds, the low winds. Okay, and his younger brother Tāwhiri Rangi, he looks after the high winds, the jet stream. And so another professor at the university, a different one this time, he said, how did your ancestors know that there was a jet stream? They had no instruments to measure it. And I said, yes, they did. It was called the kuaka. You all know the kuaka? The bar-tailed godwit. Interesting bird. So before it leaves to go back to Siberia, I think they have a stopover at the South China Sea. But before they go, the lead bird takes them up and they're testing. The old people say they're just testing to see who's strong enough to fly back. Okay? But the second job that those lead birds do with those big curved bills is they're detecting the presence and the change in the jet stream. And so when the jet stream turns, they rise up thousands and thousands together. They rise up into the jet stream and they go home. Oh, well, to the South China Sea, Japan and round there. And I said to this professor, you're the only dumb buggers who fly in a headwind for 8 days, eh? But here's the interesting thing about our tamariki that we're teaching them, and has not been in our education system, since our education system was created over 100 years ago. And this is our environmental knowledge and science, that we have over 700 names for different winds. 700. Hawaii are collaborating with us because this knowledge came from Hawaii. So when I talk about Mātauranga Māori, 1 minute ago, so when I talk about Mātauranga Māori, forgive me, it should not be Mātauranga Māori, because the Mātauranga was brought down from the Pacific and it was adapted to the Southern Ocean conditions. And so we have, just quickly, we have like 100 names for the mists, 150 for clouds, 200 for rains, 300 for snow. And that's part of the work that we're doing with our tamariki to understand the taiao and environmental science from a Māori perspective. And so we're coming to the end, so I'm going to ask this group down here, what did you come up with? 8:20 a.m. Pretty cool. That's called ngā tai pariata. So on that day is Rākau Nui. Rākau Nui is around the full moon. You will always get high tides in the morning. Okay, on the west coast it's a little bit earlier. So what was the date you guys down there got? What date did I give you? I didn't give you a date. 21st, same date. Okay, what time? Someone give me a time? West Coast. What time? Yeah, cool. It's always 3 hours earlier. Cool, easy, eh? In Maramataka stuff, that. Down the back there, what date did I give you? 29th of March. What time did you come up with for high tide? West Coast. Sorry? Get out of here. Kia ora. Thank you. Afternoon tides. You can't fool me. Maramataka tells you the tide, afternoon tides. Tangaroa days, fishing. Okay? And this last group in front here, what day did I give you? 4th of April. Oh, there's a whiro day. It should be high tides in the morning. What time did you get? 11:11? Yeah. 10:26. Yep, that's cool because it's a little bit later than the actual full moon day. So the full moon and the Rākau Nui and whiro are at the opposite ends of the calendar. And so the whiro tides, even though they're in the morning, they're about mid-morning. Whereas on the Rākau Nui days, you'll get the high tides, what we call ngā tai pariata, which at almost at daybreak. And if you understand the maramataka, which is how our tupuna found their way around the world, you also understand the tides. So if you connect to the maramataka, the types of days that we have, you are also connecting to the tides. Ka pai? Confusing for people? No, okay. Well, I think my time's up. So, huri noa I tō tātou nei whare. Tēnā koutou, kia ora mai rā tātou.
Kia ora, Ririata. Tell you what, why don't I know that there are seven parts of summer? Because we're white people just go, it's summer, lasts for a really long time, and we complain about it until autumn comes, and then we complain about the winter. And it's interesting talking about the kai and wai, because of course looking at lawa and what they're looking at now, measuring not only the nitrogen and the phosphorus, but also the macroinvertebrates and things like that, looking at the life within all of those waterways as well. So the more that I hear around people's different discussions and their relationship culturally and spiritually with water, the more I think we're all the same. You know, it's affected all of us for all that time. So, ladies and gentlemen, our fantastic presentation, please, again, Homai Te Paki. Thank you. Ririata will be staying with us. I'm now going to introduce our panel as well. If our panellists would like to come up, start with Tame Tarangi. He is representing Ngāti Whātua. He is going to be here. Tracy Brown, Chair of Dairy NZ and a part of the Dairy Environment Leaders Forum. Tracy Brown is here. We have Dr. Ian Boothroyd, ecologist with Boffa Mist School, and Andrew Chin from Auckland Waters Portfolio from the Auckland Council. Please, a round of applause for our panellists. So we're going to rapidly roll through a conversation with them. We're going to got a question each. We're going to keep our answers relatively as simple and as quick as we can because there's a lot of questions from the crowd and coming through as well. So let's start with Ririata. You've introduced us to a lot of those concepts behind the Māori worldview and the Māori view, particularly around water and life. How do you think we can apply that Māori worldview within the bureaucratic systems of New Zealand local government to deliver better water quality?
Probably never will, because the bureaucratic systems do not align with the systems of Māori environmental knowledge around maramataka. Because maramataka doesn't have a weekend, it doesn't have a holiday, and so it doesn't align well actually with any of the bureaucratic systems that rely on the Gregorian calendar.
Do you think though that looking at the macroinvertebrates, looking at all that light, the kai for the kai, there's a change there as well? I mean, that's sort of an alignment, isn't it? A little bit?
Well,
or is it just an ecological thing?
Well, what we do is we watch the migration of things like eels and the fish, the takeke, when they come inland. We're about to watch the migration of the eels very shortly. And all those seem to be running to patterns and to plans. So you can say that the eels would be running at Te Oturu, the Taiwhanake, at Te Haupārua. So that's a maramataka identification of the time and when those eels will run, and they seem to be running on track at the moment.
Marvellous. Tame, Te Māori o Te Wai, it's probably a new concept for a lot of Aucklanders. How do you think the vision of Te Māori o Te Wai will help non-Māori Aucklanders collaborate to achieve better water quality? These are great questions. Who wrote these questions? They're very good. They're good.
I guess the opportunity to try and align, if you like, the options that we have. And if we are going to continue to promote how we are in tune or in balance or in line or integrated with nature, then maybe it's time we started to take a few lessons out of nature. And there's two important factors of what Ririata has presented today. One is we must continue to strive for a balanced approach that has clear alignment of matters that occur naturally. And our part in that whole cycle or circle as humans, as ordinary citizens of the world, we really have to adjust some of our individual thinking. And for a long, long time, we have waited for leadership to come out of academia or halls of philosophy or Parliament or Wellington. And there is enough evidence now to show that that has not worked. So we're either out of balance, out of alignment, or just completely out of whack.
Do you think, because it's an interesting one, isn't it? You see this Te Māori o Te Wai in these documents, do you think that people are frightened of it? Do they think, oh, what does this mean? Is it going to take something away from me? My right to do something?
Yeah. There's a document there. It's a discussion document. Have a look at pages 7, 15, 16, 37, and 42. And that'll give you an idea of what this is all about. And I guess the option, as Ririata has already outlined, it is what distinguishes this whole opportunity from a number of other approaches. And it's not to say one is better than the other, but again, it is about getting some kind of balance and harmony and integration or alignment. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Tracy, we're going to talk about that rural kind of sector as well. Yeah, there's also a very strong cultural and spiritual relationship with water and waterways amongst that rural sector. You would know that, particularly amongst farmers and people who have the pleasure and the privilege of living out in that part of the world. Auckland, we think of it as having a pretty big urban footprint, but actually most of the region is rural. Streams and waterways running through all of that rural land. You guys are in the gun, bloody farmers, always doing the bloody farming thing with all your farming, in those places we want to put subdivisions. What are you thinking farming practices in this particular area around the harbours and the beaches? Anything needs to change there? It is changing, I'd argue.
It is changing. Kia ora, Raida. Kia ora tātou. Firstly, thanks to the Auckland Council for having me here. I do feel a little bit like a lamb to the slaughter, to use a farming pun. Probably the only farming person in the room, and we do feel it a bit sometimes. We feel this kind of urban-rural divide, especially last year or the year before, pardon me, leading into the election. So the reason I'm here is to try and help with the urban-rural connection and turn that around and try and build a relationship. So first of all, fundamentally, we need to understand that every single land user has an impact on the water. Every single person, every single person in this room, every single person in a community. And we do get into the situation where we like to blame people, and we hear that a lot, that the farmers have stuffed the waterways up, they don't care, all that kind of stuff. Well, let me tell you that we do care. We see ourselves as kaitiaki, guardians of the land. We want to care for the land for future generations, and we've been doing a lot. So in terms of what's happening in Auckland, there's only like 200 and something dairy farms, which is hardly any. For a start, there's 500 and something kilometres of waterways fenced, and there's 1,300 and something culverts and bridges. So there's a lot that dairy farmers have already done. But in terms of what else there is to do, so pardon me, as an industry, we have good farming practices, good management practices that all of agriculture is signed up to, whether you're dairy, sheep and beef or cropping. So that's really exciting, and there's 21 principles in that. We also have farm environment plans, so the industry's working at doing that, and that's all about identifying, mitigating and getting rid of risk, or reducing your risk. So we're working in that space. We've also got catchment groups happening across the country, and Trish is here from Fonterra, and I've just heard tonight that there's actually, of the 50 catchments across the country, there's going to be 3 in Auckland. So that's really exciting. So there's lots of stuff that farmers are doing and can do.
And the technology around it's changing as well, with the likes of some of the tools coming out from Balance and Ravensdale, because they know that they've got a legacy and they want to be around too, so they're helping people, particularly in the application of nutrients and things like that. So do you think there's a lot more going on in that rural sector than people, perhaps urban dwellers, may actually realise?
There's so much going on, and even just yesterday I was at a workshop with the ICCC about greenhouse gases and like how we're going to deal with that, for agriculture. So there's so much going on, and I think farmers are actually not that great at telling the good news and telling the good stories. And the stuff that we've been doing on our farm, we've been working in this space for 25 years, but never really told anyone else about it. And, there's a lot of other people doing the same thing. So,
marvellous. Ian, hello. Dr.
Hello
Ian Boothroyd. It's a problem with our water that we're trying to squeeze. This is a good question. Are we trying to squeeze more people and we're squeezing them into urban areas? There's higher density versus sprawling out onto those green areas. Where's the problem? What's the biggest problem? Is it the urban density, or is it the sprawl?
Well, the answer is probably a mixture of both, as you might expect. Actually, just turning to that question of the rural environment, one of the biggest risks to water in the rural environment as the land gets developed is actually the loss of waterways as they get sort of swallowed up in some of the subdivisions and so on that are planned. And although there are mechanisms the council have to minimise that, it's hard to imagine that we're going to get the number of people we want into Auckland without the loss of some of those waterways. And that's really important for our water quality, because those streams are the kind of the veins, if you like, the arteries of our water quality. Being an ecologist, one of the great opportunities we have is to really look at our management of those ecosystems of our waterways. And that in particular is at a scale. It was nice to hear that catchment scale that you mentioned, Tracy, and a number of them in Auckland. And looking at that scale is really where we need to be focusing our efforts for maintaining and improving our water quality, particularly in those headwater areas, that sort of the small seepages and things, the little baby streams that are imperative to maintaining our water quality downstream.
Because they're essentially the capillaries of the larger organ that is water. Do you think, are you just the scientific side of Ririata's conversation around the life in those streams, the Māori of it? Are you just codifying it?
I don't know about that, but we certainly look at it and we understand it in our own way, in our Western science manner. And in fact, you mentioned macroinvertebrates, but one of the great tools we have is we delve into those and take samples, then look at them and count them and identify them, spend hours on lab benches looking down microscopes doing this. But that does tell us the health and the condition of our waterways, so it's a very important tool. And sort of targeting, improving on those indicators and scores, if you like, is a very key part of seeing the improvement in our waterways and our water quality.
And also there's a move, Andrew, you may be able to discuss this as well, of reconnecting communities with their waterways. You've seen a lot of work, people probably might not quite know what's going on when they see a lot of that infrastructure being put in, with the bringing those waterways back to life again, rather than just putting in those channels and running that water away as fast as you can. A lot of money being spent in time and effort to bring that Māori back into them, Andrew.
Oh, absolutely. I think with the water-sensitive design approach that Auckland Council promotes, it's really the old-fashioned style of subdivision where you tried to get the water away as quickly as possible, and your back fences always backed onto the stream, and it became a forgotten wasteland, a place where you threw your garden clippings and your rubbish, and of course all that rubbish ends up in the sea, as we know. Now we really want to try and make those areas part of the amenity of a suburb. They'll be bounded by parkage roads, become part of the areas that we value most. And what we know is if you connect people and communities with the waterways in their suburbs, hopefully they value them more. They're less likely to throw rubbish in them. And a really good example of this is in La Rosa Gardens, where we actually daylighted a stream that was previously piped. The park where the old piped stream was always boggy and muddy, lots of antisocial behaviour. When that area was daylighted and became like a beautiful garden, something that the local school connected to, the incidence of antisocial behaviour dropped. It's sort of creating that place where you can value those natural places within your local suburb.
We see that out west. We've got the excellent twin streams, my local water pond, Lebanon Pond and Lake Panorama. Great European names, but essentially stormwater catchment ponds, but they're beautiful, there's life there. You think, and bringing the children back to things like this, is that a part of continuing that sense of the Māori of those places, that reconnection, or even just an explanation to kids and then on to their parents about the special nature of these waterways and these watercourses and a different way of looking at them?
And thank you for all that. I forgot to mention that great work you're doing with that daylighting of some of these streams and the really neat engineering work that's going in. But one of the things that we do, if you can reconnect our tamariki, our children, to those waterways, they start to change their behaviour. We took some of our tamariki down to the outflow of the Puhinui stream, and the young kids, and they cried. They just bawled their eyes out. And they said, why aren't we looking after these waterways? And these are 6, 7-year-olds. So yeah, if you can connect them and they see the great work that you guys are doing there in that daylighting, they change, no doubt about it.
Tame, because it's not just, this kind of concept within there of Te Māori o Te Wai. Once it's explained to people in English terms, in a way, you think they get it?
I think so, and Reriata gave a classic example of, a two-syllable words, wai and kai. If you get one of those wrong, the other sort of fails, and we, the end users of it all, we fail. So I guess the option and opportunity should be couched in terms of people appreciating what occurs naturally. And it's going back again to that idea of being in harmony, being in balance, being integrated, being aligned.
Yeah. Tracy, do you use any of those kind of concepts, that terminology in that rural sector, with the water leadership forums and various other things at Dairy NZ? What do you talk about? Do you talk about a spiritual relationship with water? Because we know that there is one.
Yeah, we do. We've started more recently talking about a Māori view of the world and what it means in terms of the water and the mountains and everything, our ancestors, and trying to get people to sort of understand and connect that way. The other thing we often talk about is we talk about wetlands as kidneys. So a wetland does for your body what does for the land. A wetland does for the land what a kidney does for the body. And we didn't know that, 20, 30, 50 years ago, and we called them swamps back in those days, and everyone went and, filled them in.
I'm Lower Waikato. I'm a swamp.
You know
I'm a
what?
swamp
You're
person.
a swamp man. Yeah,
toes are webbed and I play a banjo.
Now we call them this really cool thing called a wetland, and we're taking farmland out and planting them, and they're a really important part of the ecosystem. But we didn't know that. We didn't even really know that probably 10 years ago. So.
And there is particularly, within that rural sector, a lot rather than just putting it a pond, a lot of constructed wetlands and a lot of work going around about basically rehabilitating and rebuilding the life of those environments.
Yeah, and it takes a significant amount of work and time, and we were part of the Fonterra Open Gates a couple of years ago, and we had the opportunity for the visitors to plant trees, and one lady had come down from Auckland and she planted a tree in a hole that was pre-dug, so we had some students come out and dig the holes, and she said,
that is the kind of riparian planting activity I would turn up to.
She said to me, gosh, are you going to have another one of these? Because I want to come next time, but I'm going to get myself fit, because that was really hard. And this lady planted one tree in one pre-dug hole in a pretty flat kind of paddock.
Well,
and there's thousands of trees required.
999,999 left to go.
Yeah.
Ian, it is. Do you think within that sort of ecological world, and Andrew perhaps as well, you guys are involved in science and facts and construction. You're bringing a lot of this stuff into it as well.
Well, we are, yeah. First of all, a lot of outreach in science is about engaging with communities, particularly young people, and bringing them on board to understand our systems and participate in some of those planting regimes. But I think more importantly, it's making that connection with the water, which is really, really important. And just a little word of caution, actually, because in my own community north of Auckland, we did a great planting program along this waterway, and it was really, really successful, and all the community was out. But we can't actually see that waterway anymore, and we can't get to it anymore. So it's really important that you maintain the ability to be able to connect with it and go to it and paddle in it and fish in it or whatever that might be. True. So I think there has to be a lot of careful thought around those programs that we manage for that purpose.
Because they're ongoing. You've got to keep the life alive. You can't just allow them to be overrun with gorse and blackberry and privet.
Of course, there's
old
all
man's
of that.
Beard.
Yep, and all of those things, and pests as well, and possums, etc. So there's a huge cost, and there's a huge ongoing commitment to maintaining those.
Which gets us, Andrew.
So I was just saying, I guess on the council infrastructure side, we've often been really good at compartmentalising the way we manage water. We've got our wastewater, our water supply, stormwater. We talked about 3 water strategies. And when we started the process of this discussion document, they said, we'll do a 4 water strategy. Let's include the marines and the streams, and 6 waters it got to, and then 7 waters. Let's think about geothermal water. And then when we started engaging with the Kaitiaki Forum, they said, te mauri o te wai. You've got to take an integrated and holistic view. And I think the penny sort of dropped with us and said, well, this is actually a very powerful concept that captures this idea of treating it all together. You need to... What we realised is we couldn't do a strategy for stormwater without considering wastewater, without considering the water supply networks as well, or the streams that they discharge to, or the aquifers and so forth. And when and trying to find a pithy and uniquely Auckland vision statement, Te Mauri o Te Wai really captured it once we started to understand it a bit more. So that's sort of the path that we travelled on as we started to develop the document.
Now, questions coming in from the Slido, and here's one, because this is a big one. We've seen Whanganui recognised as a person. Someone's asked, along the side of this kind of concept of treating water as this with a spirituality and a living entity, is legally making the Hauraki Gulf a living being? Is that being considered? Will that change what happens with that? Are we having a discussion on that level? Ririata?
You have multiple bodies here. So you got ngā wai o te Waitemata, ngā wai nui o Peretu, Tikapa Moana, that flows down into Te Moana Nui a Toi. And so you got multiple bodies different to what they're doing down in Whanganui, ko au, ko te awa, ko au, one water body. But up here there are multiple ones. So how you do that? And then you got to go across to Manukau,
Yeah.
Te Manuka Nuka Hoturoa, the Kupunga Taramai Nuka, and all those kōrero. So it's like pretty tough.
A wai whānau. There's a lot of individuals, and they'll all have different demands, I would imagine. Tame.
Well, I should declare I was part of the stakeholder work group that constructed the Marine Spatial Plan, one of 14, and that's a non-statutory document that is going through some consideration for implementation now. And a couple of things happened in that 3-year period. One of them was a National Party politician from somewhere at the top of the South Island who arrived in Auckland and had this idea of creating a recreational fishing park within that water space. A point I want to make here is that there is enough regulation in and around the legal framework to do a whole range of things. But the problem that we come up against again is that it's disaggregated and it is not aligned. So you have the Hauraki Golf Forum, you have legislation there, you have the RMA, you have a whole myriad of regulations that could be fine-tuned to allow a more integrated approach and to begin to capture the essence of what's being said here of an integrated, aligned approach.
Marvellous. Questions from the crowd? You're here. You've just listened to 3/4 of an hour of excellent presentations. Any questions from the crowd, or I'll go back to the Slido with some of you asking questions from there. At the back. Hello, madam. How are you? There's a microphone right behind you. There you go. Questions, not statements.
2 questions. What are we doing to help have better climate balance with more trees? And the other one is, what are we doing about 1080 in the Hanua catchment area getting into our water supply, maybe?
Maybe they're putting the 1080 on to stop the animals eating the trees. I don't know. Who wants to take care of it? So, because the more trees, that's part of a strategy as well. You know, you're not just putting in concrete, you're planting stuff.
Absolutely, and I think part of the program, and if I was thinking about last year, Auckland Council approved a water quality targeted rate. And it's sort of my roughly 20-year career, it's the first time that there's been ring-fence money focused on water quality outcomes. And a big part of that program is the urban and rural stream rehabilitation. And of course, it's not just the in-stream, it's managing that erosion of the stream banks and those riparian areas. And I think this is like, in the rural space, it's not just the stock exclusion from the waterways, it's that riparian buffer that's so important where we can capture a lot of that planting that acts as that filter.
Here's my question. Do you think people know? Because we see you doing your stuff and we stand there and we go, I wonder what they're doing, spending a bit of money, there for a while, bit inconvenient, I want to walk through that car park to get to where I'm going. Do you think people know, or do you think maybe you should invest in some signs so that it brings people on board in communities? They can turn up to wherever it is that you're doing something and read a little sign that gives a big... It is a little bit of money, but it's outreach. That explains a holistic view as well as perhaps the ecological view and the cost of what a project is. And then people go, oh shit, I can see why they're doing that now. That's fantastic. I can't wait for them to be finished. And then they become advocates for what it is you're doing. Do you think people know?
I think that people know some of it, but there's so much going on. And I think what I learned through with the Stocking, I've got an engineering background, and I realised that I actually didn't have the communication skills for the way I'd write a project that would communicate very well with the general
That's why you
public.
guys employ a lot of comms people.
That's why we hire people who can actually put things in plain English and tell these stories. We've got,
Well, Teresa, I was going to ask you, mentioned twin streams previously.
Yeah.
And I think there's quite a lot of good signage around there.
There is a lot of good signage around there. It's fantastic.
They do that very well there. So
yeah.
there's a very good reason where we can to do that.
But see, even around something like some of the new stormwater things, the swales and various other things, people just look at it and go, oh, geez, I've just put some dirt in and planted some tussock and it's probably going to die. Do you think that even those little projects need explaining to people who live in the communities because they don't know what you're doing?
Yes, and I think we've actually got some very new exciting ideas, and this is part of what the water quality targeted rate has opened up. These areas where there's more rain gardens, more swales, in the roadway, they're filtering the water before it gets into the stormwater pipe. But of course it costs more to maintain. It's not just a piece of grass berm that the resident mows themselves. They take a little bit more specialist maintenance. And so some of the ideas that are being seriously explored at the moment is to create jobs for people in communities to maintain those, so that local people will start maintaining the vegetation as like a garden, take some pride in their street. 2 guys in a ute to use the extra cost. What is a problem? Additional maintenance costs. Let's turn that into an opportunity, turn this infrastructure into a way to help drive the prosperity of our suburbs. So this is, this is the kind of thing.
Because they're also not only there doing their job, they're outreach people as well. People can go, what are you doing? And they can say, well, I'm doing this as part of this. It's a wider part of something else. Tracy, Aucklanders, we just outsource all of the cost of our structures. It's in our rates bills. Rural sector to a certain extent, it's expected that they pay for that themselves from their on-farm profits. Is there a sort of do you think Aucklanders have a disconnect with that? Urban dwellers, in a way?
Well, probably. We absolutely, everything on our farm we've paid for. Thousands and thousands of trees. Some regional councils across the country, you can get grants and things for subsidised fencing and trees, but it comes out of your farm working expenses, and it's just part of your business because you need to do it. I was just going to add to what you'd said about getting communities to look after rivers and things. On the 22nd of March is World Water Day, and I don't know if anyone's seen the Vision is Clear advertising and stuff, but it's kind of been a call to action for everybody to get on board and look after, everyone to take actions big and small. And on the 22nd of March, the dairy industry in particular, but all of agriculture, is encouraging everybody to take one action to look after these stream or local waterways. So how cool would it be if everyone in Auckland got on board with that as well? It'd be really cool.
Having these people out there doing something like that, do you think that would be a nice sort of gateway for people, to explain a little bit more around, Te Māori or Te Wai, or some of the concepts around water, to allow them to look at their environment perhaps in a slightly different way?
Yeah, we do that every year along with parks, with our parks department. We plant thousands and thousands of Shane Jones trees. But also in the planting of those trees, we also talk to them about the stuff that we're talking here today and reconnecting them back to those kind of old concepts.
Questions from the crowd? Oh, there we go. Hello. We've got a mic. Actually, we'll run a mic over there. You can shout. Erosion control.
Yeah, John from Erosion Control. By default, we're involved in so many of your projects, bits, pieces, small ones, big ones, across the board, across the country. How do you deal with the challenges of sort of collating the goods and the bads? I often say, the projects and the outcomes are great, and I congratulate council on some of these daylighting projects and stuff you're doing, but how do you sometimes the process that I see getting there, I look at it and say maybe it could be done better or bits and pieces. How do you, with such a big beast like council and all the other entities involved, how do you sort of reconcile all that information and make sure that you take all those learnings forward?
So the data and data around water quality is a big job. I'd say the way that we're looking at the catchments in Auckland are around the major, what we call it, the big watersheds, everything that drains into the Manukau watershed, and looking at that sort of super catchment scale, if you like. And there's a number of tools and models that we use to look at the effects of all of our interventions. And there's and we're not reinventing a wheel here. We're using science that's tried and tested from the United States through the experience they've had in the Clean Water Act. And we know from those overseas experiences, looking at that catchment scale, when we're looking at offsets and allocation type issues, that you can turn around water quality. If we look at some overseas experiences in Chesapeake Bay in the US, or even the River Thames, waterways that were dead, essentially, but through a long-term management. And I guess one of the challenges that we really have to think about here is this managing the expectations beyond a political cycle. Getting to the end point in a similar way to those overseas jurisdictions is going to take a very long time. You're not going to see an improved water quality result in the harbour 6 months after you finish Project X. It's a sustained effort in multiple projects to get us there. And the private individual has a huge part to play in this.
Oh, we've seen that Raglan Harbour, for example. Some of a lot of the riparian planting there's brought all this, the snapper spawning back again, and it happened in a relatively quick time. But again, that work has to be ongoing. Hey, look, there are some questions as well, and some of the big ones. Those, I think, is it 35 billion odd in the next 10, 20, 30 years? Around resilience. I mean, and resilience is a big question. We turn the tap on, water comes out, it falls out of the sky, and mostly it goes away somewhere. Are we going to run out of water? Because we haven't built a dam since 1977. We just outsourced our demand for water to the Waikato. That can't continue forever. We've got more people who want to drink.
In the short term, no. The Watercare have got an application in for the Waikato. The municipal part of Auckland is going to be okay for water till at least 2050.
That's not very far away. It's nearly 2020.
Yeah, so, yeah. In my lifetime, sort of 30 years, I'm going to be pretty old.
You'll still be you'll still be drinking and wanting to have a bath.
Yeah, but you're right. We do need to start thinking longer term. But it's for our municipal water supply, some of these things are a little bit further off. But that doesn't mean we need to think about our personal resilience in the event of a natural disaster. If we take a leaf out of Wellington Water's book, after the Kaikoura earthquake, they realised if there's a catastrophic failure of their networks, it could be months before people could get reliable and safe water back to their house. So Wellington Water have subsidised rain tanks to capture water. Now those rain tanks are collecting the roof runoff mostly for watering the garden, but they know that individual households would have at least 200, 400 litres of water to see them through that kind of an emergency. So that's the kind of resilience I think we need to think about. But in terms of have we got enough water, municipal, yes, we're pretty good. But there's going to be pinch points in some of our communities, say like at Helensville, where they're not connected to the main municipal system. In our rural spaces, the aquifers, they're looking like they're approaching fully allocated. Pukekohe provides nearly, I think it's 80% of our fresh produce leading up to Christmas. And if we have really dry springs and there's a fully allocated aquifer there, these are critical elements to our water needs. So it's not just our municipal supply that we've got to think about when we think about Auckland.
Across the region as well. Ian?
If I can just talk to ecosystem resilience, I mean, you're right, some of those ecosystems can come back quite quickly if they're well thought through in the restoration process. And that's why I mentioned the catchment scale is quite critical to that and looking after those headwaters. So we have a lot of built-in resilience in our ecosystems if we just manage that process accordingly.
And we're talking, about the sort of that potable water, but also the sewage water in some of our rural communities and the changes and the cost that's going to have to go into there. And we've certainly seen a lot of talk around provincial cities and towns needing to spend a lot of money to tidy up their kind of sewage systems. That's a cost that's going to have to be incurred across the sort of, I guess, those rural communities in Auckland that aren't on the septic system.
Yes, some of our. A lot of people think that the water quality issues with Safe Swim identifiers is a lot of it's linked to our wastewater networks and the stormwater contamination. But actually, some of our really poor performing beaches are where we've got septic system, on-site wastewater, Waiheke, Piha, Bethels. This is difficult nut to crack. Essentially, you've got lots of houses on clay soils in small sections. It's a high risk, and a lot of those properties were built at a time when there was not much in the way of standards and regulation for septic systems. Yeah, that's correct, yeah. So how we can improve those water qualities in those communities in an affordable way is a very difficult issue. It's a hard nut to crack.
Yeah, because Ririata Tame, that sewage, that effluent into waterways, it's anathema to everything in many ways that you've been talking about. Is there just that huge demand? Is there a prioritising in a way as to where you, within the kind of the water leadership forums and things, would like some of that money spent? Tame, been involved in some of these discussions, have you?
Well, I guess that the crunch point comes again from a disconnected band of citizens. You have a look at the last local body elections, the Māori voter turnout was languishing somewhere around 27%. So 3/4 of the Māori population, the world's largest Māori population, ain't even fronting up to vote or to engage on what we're talking about here. And I guess there's a starting point that tries to encourage engagement at the community level. Get involved in the 22 local boards and familiarise ourselves with the lay of the land.
It's
And,
pretty. I mean, it's pretty evident even looking here. There's a strikingly large single demographic in this room. White people, I'm looking at you. I'm one of you.
I think the point though that's being made here is building awareness is one thing, but then engaging in the type of changes that are needed for these respective communities is critical. And having that level of turnout at election time is a sort of quite a mediocre result, I think.
We do have pretty poor levels of voter participation, that is for sure. Any questions from the floor? Yes, sir.
How do you reconcile the tendency of rivers in water to meander with the requirements of town planning?
Okay, so the question for those people at home, this is a good question. How do you reconcile the tendency for rivers to meander? I'm going to look at my river, the Waikato, used to flow out to the Firth of Thames. That is a hell of a meander it has now undergone, with the requirements of urban planning and growth.
Property ownership.
And property ownership.
Yep, so obviously if you've got a big farm and your river meanders through it, you're not going to be, you're not that concerned if you lose 20 metres here or there if it's all your land. But in an urban context, if that river erodes and you lose half your section, you've got a problem. And if you think about the land values in Auckland, some people are facing significant loss. Essentially, we try to create a steady state in our streams in the urban environment. And the old-fashioned way was to line them with concrete and make them rock solid. But I think engineering has changed so much now. We are essentially, through a water-sensitive design project, trying to achieve that stable stream, but through a much more soft engineering approach that's trying to mimic natural processes. But we will try and reinforce those bends and meanders in the soft alluvium to stabilise them, because it's people's property and it's their life.
L5 trench sheeting.
Sorry?
L5 trench sheeting.
L5 trench sheeting. That is the most specific statement I have ever had.
So it's how you preserve the bend in the river.
Ah, right. That's great. We're going to have a long conversation about this afterwards. Hey, look, we're very much running out. That sense of that water-sensitive design, that's bringing a sense of that, not only the ecological and the engineering sense back to it, but it's bringing some of that Māori and some of that spirituality as to what a watercourse should do back into it. Would you say, or am I wrong?
No, one of the things that we're doing in our kura with our kura kids is that we try and teach them about not only their ancestral knowledge, but also to be creative and innovative around water. And so we'll send them down the street with this one knowledge, which helps them with their maths too, and helps me with my maths, that you get an 8x8 garage roof in Auckland will collect about 30,000 litres of water in a year. And you get them to find out how much water is collected on one side of that street by using just that one mathematical. And then what do you do with it afterwards? And that's where we have to, with them, getting them to be innovative and creative about how we capture that water and how we use it in future. Because I don't think there's a shortage of water, it's just a shortage of how we store it and how we capture it.
Absolutely. So, look, we are pretty much out of time before we hear from Penny, who's going to wrap things up. Maybe just a final statement. It can be anything to do with water, with the future, with our relationship with water, whatever it may be. Could be a hot fishing tip for a good day to go fishing. I don't know. We'll start, Andrew, we'll start with you. One final statement around this conversation that we would have with water.
It's a plea to put your feedback in. It is a discussion document, and you might think, oh, what's the point in feeding back? But the submissions have weight. Numbers have weight, and they do have influence. So the more people that get engaged and touch on this, the more likely we are to achieve what we hope is a broad consensus, the broadest consensus we can get, because there's going to be some tough decisions in the future around water, around flooding, climate, the rights to take water. But at this stage, if we can all be part of the conversation, we can at least agree a framework and the values and the outcomes and why we are doing it, so we can hopefully grab that consensus.
Marvellous. Essentially, in some way, emphasising what Tami was saying, being a part of this dialogue and conversation and participating. Ian?
Well, I'd actually just endorse that, really, that connection back with water and in this discussion. My view is that, a lot of the science we know, it's not about doing more and more science and research. I think innovation in some of the technology is highly relevant, but it is about making decisions, making the right decisions and putting them in the right prioritisation. And that's something that Auckland has to have a discussion about, and you all need to be part of that as well.
Tracy?
Thanks, Radar. So in the ag sector, we have the Te Hono movement, and they have a saying called Itanui, and it's about small actions and big actions can have big results. So it's about the big things, like what your council can do, plus it's about the little everyday actions that we can all do as individuals and the choices that we make, and all that together will make a big difference.
Little droplet soon becomes an ocean kind of thing. Tami?
Yeah, kia ora tātou. Thank you for your attendance tonight, and I just look at the discussion document here and hope the two youngsters on the front there are part of the review panel that looks at the decisions that are taken at the end of this discussion document process, all your submissions that come through, and I hope those two youngsters there are sufficiently robust enough to make a judgment call on what our predecessors decided for their future.
Kia ora. I think that for me there are two distinct worldviews on approaching water in an approach to water. And I think that the Māori worldview should stand on its own, and the Western science worldview should stand on its own as well. And one should support the other in how we go forward from here.
Well, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to ask Penny to come up and just sum up. Hello, Penny. Got a couple of questions for you after this about the Waitakere Natural Heritage Area, where I'm thinking of purchasing a land in the very near future. Hey, before she does, please, what a wonderful panel. Homai te Paki Paki. Round of applause for all of our panellists. Andrew, Ian, Tracy, Tame, Ririata. I'm going to go. You're going to wrap it up, Penny. And like, these conversations are fantastic. I will never go and look at the season of summer again, knowing that there are all those little infinite variations of it. It's one of those things that I love in a conversation like this, when someone presents some information about something that we live and see every day, and we look at it in a totally different way. So hopefully you've all got something out of this. I think it's been a wonderful sort of session, and do please participate, because none of these issues are going anywhere. Hello, Penny. Kia ora, welcome. Again, a round of applause for our panellists.
Kia ora. First of all, I just want to acknowledge this wonderful panel, and I've got a few words to say shortly. But thanking all of you for being here, and particularly thanking Aucklanders who, at the last annual plan or during the long-term financial plan that Council consulted on, you voted overwhelmingly to support a targeted rate for water. And I think, as the panel said, this is extraordinary. Aucklanders said water matters, our harbours matter, and the state of water matters. And for that, I think the aroha and heart that went into that decision, thank you. But we have much to do, and I think I just want to touch very briefly on what some of our panel members said. Ririata, thank you for your wise kōrero and that linkage between kai and wai. We talk about, the macroinvertebrates and the state of the system, blah, blah, blah. Kai and wai, what a sensible way for us to actually view the state of our water. I want to acknowledge Tracy on behalf of the dairy farmers, and I'm going to have a bit of a crack at us, urban Aucklanders. We talk a lot with our noses in the air about dirty dairying as we drive our four-wheel drives around the streets of Auckland, shedding bits of asbestos and copper and fibres from our tyres and heavy metals from our fuel, and we're destroying areas like Ngataranga Bay, which is now so deep in heavy metals that it is almost unable to sustain life. So kia ora, and thank you for your passion around raising these issues in the dairy industry. Our wonderful Tame, thank you. We sit together on the governance board that has been overseeing the development of Te Māori o Te Wai. And the thing that I really took from what you said, Tame, is a little bit of that get involved, get active, get actioned about this. You know, there's a lot of talk and a lot of raruraru and a lot of jaw flapping, but there's nothing like actually getting in, being part of the system and making a difference. And also supporting people when you vote, and you will be voting in October this year. Luckily I'm not standing, so I can be pretty damn direct about this. Ask those questions. What are you going to do about the state of water? Our water is in dire straits in the Auckland region. Don't listen to those people who tell you they're going to save rates or reduce rates, because they will reduce rates exactly as has been said, at the expense of our environment, at the expense of our people. I won't go on, but boy, I could. So don't take any of that bullshit at face value, because it's a flawed system. The more we save, the more we degrade our environment. It's the thing that suffers. Stop me now. I also want to acknowledge our wonderful Ian. Thank you for bringing that humane face of science into this, and particularly I love you for giving big ups to Project Twin Streams. That was my baby back in old Waitakere days, and I think we can learn from experimenting, being brave, and not solving all the problems. We're not going to solve everything, but damn it, we have to start, and I think for that I really appreciate it. Finally, from the panel, my deep thanks to Andrew. This must make a change from schlepping around talking septic tanks, which is part of what Andrew's job for the last little while has been. You're an engineer with heart and vision, and I think we're in very good hands for your bravery in taking on this role. I also want to acknowledge our wonderful Radar. To Radar, as always, you use your fame and your capabilities for good, and your passion for the environment is legendary, and we thank you. So action points: get involved, stand for council, vote for people who'll stick up for the environment, join Tame as we change the face of council for people who actually get this stuff. The Water Day on the 22nd of March, it's actually my grandson's birthday, so I'm pretty committed. He's 7, and I want a water future for him. So it's a real inspiration to get out there, do small things, do big things, get active, get involved. But mostly get involved in Te Māori o Te Wai. Have your say, put in your submission, challenge us, challenge the thinking. Some of the stuff we've heard today, let's start those hard conversations. Let's talk about, how do we actually reduce our water use any further? How do we get subsidies for water tanks? How do we each take action? For goodness sake, turn off the tap when you're cleaning your teeth. I want to slap people when they leave that tap running. And think about that beautiful, precious, potable water gifted from Tainui and the Waikato that we flush our toilets with, that we waste, that we, as Te Rara says, that we never take a moment to acknowledge and respect that water that's servicing us. So start those challenging conversations at dinner parties. And finally, take time to think about future generations. The things that we enjoy on these magnificent harbours are not ours to mess with. We borrow them from the future, and we actually owe it to future generations to treat the sacredness of water as Māori have done in the past and guarded it for hundreds and hundreds of years, that we have taken possibly 2 generations to destroy. We need to think seriously on that. So kia ora, thank you most warmly for being here, and let's go and enjoy one of the 7 parts of summer. It's out there tonight. Thank you.